All right, we're back. I'm pleased that Jace has not left yet because I've been jabbering, trying to get through all of this, what happened today in Washington, but hopefully we clarified it.
Yes. Set
the stage as to what happened in Washington today. The Respect for Marriage Act, we covered it on News Channel 5 earlier in our newscast. So let's let you pick up from there.
Yeah.
President Biden's going to sign it into law. We know there are states, more conservative states, perhaps have already passed trigger laws of some sort. What's your concern? What do you think are the next steps? Because I'm sure at the Equality Project you've been monitoring this.
Yeah.
And the impact here in Tennessee. Go.
Yeah. So most of the focus has unfortunately had to be on a lot of the anti-trans legislation that's come up, but we still obviously are keeping an eye out for anything that might come up. With Tennessee, however, in our Constitution, we have a phrase actually in there that says that the only recognized marriages in the state are between one man and one woman. So whenever this law goes into place, it will, as far as we know right now, still not exempt that from our Constitution, and will also not exempt the state of Tennessee from potentially going forward with other legislation that may try and create a ban. But in years past, we've managed to actually advocate and been able to kill those bills that have attempted to create such a ban or create that trigger law that goes into place and created that protection. But it doesn't stop them from potentially doing it in the future and using that constitutional backing from the state. But the good thing about this Respect for Marriage Act is that there is a part of it that says that even if you are in a state that bans your ability to get married, first off, you could go to another state and get married, and it will be federally recognized, meaning that your state also has to respect it on matters of protection.
Yeah, you can come back to Tennessee and be protected.
Yes.
As a trans person, I would say same-sex marriage it's been, what, 7 years now legalized? Yeah. Why do you think the majority of our lawmakers would now think that this past 7 years has been so horrible? And I want to get into some numbers as far as population too.
Yes, yeah.
In Tennessee, the latest numbers of who identify as what is growing also. Why would they want to turn around and you know, reverse this?
Yeah, so
what do you think, and how does that make you feel?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So there's kind of two ways that we can look at it. One of the ways that we really have to acknowledge is that kind of what Mike's bringing up about there is a religious argument that is made. And the thing that we have to try to remember, though, is
religious, specifically Christian, or
sometimes it could be other as well. Like I definitely
religions that advocate or teach, preach a more traditional view of life and family, and so on.
Right. Whenever we're talking about the religious aspects on that, we're definitely looking at that kind of teaching, and that traditionally has been very much in the South as well. And we don't want to ignore the validity of those experiences, but we also have to recognize that the law's purpose is to provide legal protection, and that we cannot use religion to try and, you know, enforce one way or another.
Right. And I thought that, you know, in this day and age, that we all know that to respect each other's religious views and religious doctrine, but it is doctrine and it cannot be applied to the law. There is a separation. You can believe this and live your life this way, in this manner, but if you're one particular belief or religion, this country is just so diverse, and you're telling me, wait, I have to live my life the way you're. That's a big issue here.
Yeah, and one of the things that I also like to bring to the table, and I know that others that are in the community also reflect this, is that for religious beliefs that we often try to come back to the fact that, first off, before anything else, before any rules that may come from religion, that first and foremost, I am your neighbor no matter what I do in my life. That even if what you see of me as a wrong practice or a wrong lifestyle, I am first and foremost your neighbor. So even though you may disagree with that, you can still accept and respect my own chosen path, because if it was against God, which in my personal view, you know, I am living in the image of God that he provided for me, but not gonna go super down that road. But again, it's still that matter of like, you have this wonderful right to choice that even in like, let's say there were no laws in the nation and it was just only religion, you still have the right to what path you choose. And that's the thing that we also bring back into that legislative argument of just that the law's purpose is to still protect that right to choose, to protect that right to identity, and to protect all the pathways in which doesn't cause someone else or yourself harm. That's the purpose of the law and what it's supposed to be used for, not to weaponize any kind of idea on either side as well. So that's where we come from on that, but also from a state standpoint of kind of what we're talking about with the federal protections, stuff like that. Again, acknowledging that everyone has that same right to life, not to go all Thomas Jefferson, but life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. That includes, you know, having the same access to end of care, end of life care, things like that. Those are things that are protected whenever you have, you know, federally recognized marriage, and that's for any individual person. And those things all matter in this conversation, but they end up being taken out because we get caught up in those almost like political brownie points.
Right. And
that's where we really struggle, is that especially when, for example, there's been a lot of issues with DCS, when big issues like this come up, minority groups tend to get thrown into the ring as the saving grace of like, this is an quote unquote easy problem to solve because we can kind of run over this group and pass this law and make our group happy again, but we're ignoring this big huge issue because it's way too complex. And we've seen that repeat throughout history.
Speaking of ignoring this big issue because it's way too complex, viewers, hello. No phone calls right now, but 737+ is the phone number if you'd like to call in. I know it's a deep, heavy topic we're talking about, and we spent a whole hour and we still can't even kind of get there. You, I'm sure, having gone through what you have, your personal experience, being trans and making this big decision, do you now kind of I don't know the word, consult or talk with maybe trans youth or anyone coming along? And I can imagine those who, you're very well versed in this, and obviously you're following the legislation. For the lay person, it's confusing. Absolutely. You know, a trans person, LGBTQ, whoever comes to you and say, I'm really scared. Yeah. What is the Supreme Court going to do? What does this mean? You know, I'm living my life the way I want. What is the, you know, there's fear there. Absolutely. So, you know, you can tell it's palpable. Yeah. What do you say, and what do you really think might happen? And obviously this is a step today. Yeah. That makes you smile. Yeah. It's like, okay. Yeah. Give me a little of that. Yeah. Your reaction. So first, to kind of note on what I do with my conversations with trans youth, because there are a lot of them about that fear around not being able to live in the States should they move. And that's one of the biggest questions I actually get is, should we be considering moving to another state where like this child has protections, where their school can't take away their right to education, stuff like that. And I try and encourage them to stay because of the fact that if we start running to other states and we start making that an acceptable division to have in every state, then we're saying that it's acceptable in law for us to be rejected from a certain territory in the United States where we all are under the same constitution. So I say, like, if you really see Tennessee as home and you really do like want to be here, you know, we'll definitely encourage you to use your voice and, you know, fight alongside us and educate you on how you can advocate either on a personal one-to-one level or on the state level as well. Going to get back to the phone line. See, you heard me, folks. I appreciate it. Granger, welcome. Go ahead.
Yeah, hey, I've got a question for Jace, and I've heard this comment on the program tonight. Why would a person choose a trans lifestyle against lifestyle? I'm not current, but I think it used to be, the research was showing that people were biologically different.
Yes.
And I would like to have Chase comment on the current research on that and whether that's true.
Yeah.
And I have a belief that there are some biological differences. You're born gay, you're born trans, okay? If that's true, you know, you've also talked about how wrong it is in some people's beliefs. Well, Rhori, I'll have you challenge us to call again, because my God is better than other gods, because he doesn't make imperfect creatures, and therefore we should accept everybody and give everybody the freedom to be who they are. So I'll leave it up to you guys to make comments.
I couldn't agree more with you, Granger. You know, thank you for the call, and I like people who take a step back and look at that broader. Again, if you know, the basic thing that I learned is whatever God it is, your God. God is love, period. So that's a great point. What do you have to say?
I completely, first off, want to say I 100% agree with that, because I think that sometimes we get caught up in what we think is the perfect image for somebody else based off of what we read, based off our own interpretations. But one of the great things that, like, no matter what religion you are in, is that there tends to be the same phrasing of like that let go, let God deal with that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like you don't have the job or the pressure of judgment, so you don't have to do that. And that's such a great thing to be able to say.
Yeah, and I find people who have grown with their beliefs, who've opened their hearts and listened and slowly changed. It's a relief, because you're carrying this, I'm not going to say hate, but there's a confusion, there's a bitterness, there's a little bit of anger and stubbornness.
Yeah.
And when you let that go, that tolerance, it's like, okay, this is nice. And then you have a conversation and you realize there's no boogeyman out there.
Yeah.
These are my neighbors. Yeah. But I understand people are still very, very opposed.
Yeah.
He mentioned this genetics or biological, and I know I've talked to people who've told me they knew since as early as they can remember that I'm attracted to this group of people.
Yeah.
Didn't know why, but whatever. And others who knew it, wasn't sure, lived a different life, and then finally got old enough and mature enough to say, no, this is not me. Yeah. Right?
Absolutely. And I'll talk first on some of the biological aspects, then I'll talk about like my own experience with that a little bit too. First, on the biological aspects, like there is still even more research out there regarding both sexual orientation, which is who you're attracted to, and then gender identity, which is who you feel that you are. Both of those have biological markers in them. And for gender identity, it's less known, but there's so many studies about hormone washes while you're still in utero. There are studies about chromosome spacing, so it's actually on a chromosomal level, which tends to be a lot of the argument. Sometimes it's actually hormonal preference of your body as well. There's so many theories and things that have been proven as differences that, you know, do show that. But on that personal note of, you know, knowing from either an early age or so on, I remember I had kind of my first experience with realizing what was going on around like 10 or 11. I didn't know super early, but I knew that something was always different. I just didn't have a word for it.
Got a couple of minutes, and I know we have a couple callers I'm going to try to squeeze in. So give me the Cliff's Notes version. Biologically born female.
Yes.
Tell me how this progressed. And like you said, gender affirming care saved your life.
Yeah, so it progressed from I first started socially transitioning, which is whenever you just start presenting yourself as the gender that you feel you are. Right. When I was about 13 or 14, I cut my hair in the bathroom, very dramatic. And, you know, it was a lot of back and forth and a lot of conflict because I grew up in Pegram and I went to Harpeth, and it was just very
traditional values kind of place in a small town.
There was definitely a lot of backlash, and I had many bouts of struggling with housing, stuff like that. And then eventually I kind of stopped transitioning for a while because of safety, which a lot of trans people do sometimes, that detransitioning sometimes because of safety. Then I came back out during college and I started using my name and fully started medically transitioning when I was about 19.
Wow. So, it's a process. And how old are you now, Matt?
I'm 22.
22.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get Danielle on the line. Hi, Danielle. Thanks for calling.
Good evening. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Well, I've got a quick question.
Yep.
Now that and I just had the term on the bill for equal marriage rights. Now that it's been going through channels and everything, once it reaches the president's table to be signed, is when and if he does sign it, what kind of backlash do you expect, if any?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think he'll sign it.
Yeah, I think that
he'll
definitely sign it. I do expect that some states will try to create some sort of either maybe, unfortunately, we might see some executive actions of attempting to make trigger laws if states don't have them. Again, if there are states that have trigger laws, those would go into place. But again, one of the great things about this bill is that it was very smart. It was very smart in its crafting, and the fact that, again, even though it's very inconvenient and not the best of solutions, it still creates that protection of if you go out of state to another state, you can get that marriage license, and it has to be respected by the state that you live in.
Excellent. So, all right, Danielle, we're going to keep going here. We've got Melanie on line 3. Hi, Melanie. Melanie, you there?
Yes, thank you, Roy.
You're welcome. Go ahead.
I want to say that I have a son that is gay, and I have 4 children. He's my oldest, and when he was about 5 years old, I realized that he was gay. I didn't say anything. I had never really been around anybody that was gay, but I could just tell. And at 5 years old, a child doesn't have any idea of what is going on really sexually. So he was born this way, and I think it's out of ignorance and out of religion that people think that this is a choice that is made. And my son told me one time, he goes, Mom, he said, why would anybody make a choice to have their life the hardest possible?
But the important,
this isn't a choice.
Melanie, I would say the important choice is as your motherly, gut told you that you think he's gay, but then you provided safety and support, emotional support.
Absolutely.
I'm sure, as he grew and matured and found himself, and that is so important because we know. Thank you for the call. So many others don't face that.
Yes, and unfortunately we know that the majority of youth that experience homelessness are LGBTQ, and the majority of those that are LGBTQ and homeless are transgender, especially. But it's a very sad statistic because a lot of it, I think the top reason that was actually found by the American Psychological Association was because of running away from a family that rejected them based off their identity, with the second being that they were kicked out by their family members.
Not to mention the issue of anxiety, depression, and suicide.
Absolutely.
Which, it can all spiral, which is so sad.
And it all comes together of that lack of support. It kind of creates that ripple effect of, like, maybe it is just that moment of someone makes that uneducated comment or whatever it is, and it isolates that child, makes it feel less valued, things like that, and that can spiral into developing depression, anxiety, and then having those housing issues, things like that, because they keep getting rejected every step of the way.
One more quick call before we go to our final break, and that is Melanie. No, Darlene. Just heard from Melanie. Hi, Darlene. Go ahead.
Yes, I just have a comment from the King James Version Bible in Romans 1 and 24 and 25. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of God into a lie, and worshiped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. King James, especially, version of the Bible, there's a lot, you know, we could go on for weeks, and the Bible says a lot of stuff that is, you know, can be debated. And what's your reaction?
I would just like to say, like, first and foremost, I think that, and I don't want to point to any malintention because I don't know the person's intention for that phrasing, but
well,
I know
someone, obviously she's cares very much about her Christianity and her beliefs, which is to be respected.
Yeah, and so I want to reflect that back and say absolutely, and this is where I kind of come back in, and I found that, you know, and again, I'll speak for myself, but I know that for other trans folks as well, for many of us, we did not feel any relationship or feel anything really that was love or happiness towards God until we started really being able to transition, when we started going against the transgressions that were happening against us, maybe in good favor.
Internal conflict, once you're able to be the person you believe you were born to be, you can open your heart.
Yes, and you become more loving, and you can actually be able to participate because you are living as, again, the image of God that was meant for you.
And there are a lot of contradictions, but again, Darlene, we appreciate your comment and absolutely respect it, no doubt about it. We're going to take our final break. Jace, stay with us. We'll be right back.